Hey everybody, welcome to the Bearded Tog with Adam Mason. I'm your host, Adam. Thank you so much for listening to the Bearded Tog. Today we're talking about a super exciting topic. We're talking about SEO, aka search engine optimization, something that a lot of business owners don't understand, don't want to get into, don't want to spend the time on. But the reality is that Google is the first place when people are looking for your services go. And why not show up there? Why not be on the first page? Why not rank a little bit for this thing that you put effort into? Like if you're already blogging, if you're already caring about your site and how it looks and how it feels and how clients feel when they're on it, why not put some time in and care about how Google feels so that you can rank for the things that you're an expert on? And so today I have Dylan Howell on. He's absolutely incredible at SEO. He ranks in the top 10 for one of his main keywords and a few others. And for wedding photographers, at least, it's usually the city name and wedding photographer after. And that's kind of where we want to show up. And he has ranked for a long time in 2 different markets. And so we kind of share about that. And we've got some resources and some apps for you to check out that I use and he used that are just really super fun. And this is one of those things, guys, where even if you just took one full day, if you can devote 8 hours of focus to this and just looking over your site after listening to this episode and writing a few notes, you can have your site be in a better place after that 1 hour day, or that one day, not 1 hour day, but after that day. And that's what I love about the Bearded Tog is every episode is just going to be a resource for you in your business journey, wherever you're at. For me, I didn't care about SEO until 2 years ago. And I had been shooting weddings for 6-7 years and had all this content, and I wasn't ranking for anything. And so I realized that I was not in the right place where I wanted to be. And so I put some time in, did some research, found out that my site had 2 meta descriptions, which is not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to have 1. It's kind of like having 2 bios, if essentially not about pages, but like Google sees 2 bios of you and they read the wrong one. And so I didn't rank for anything. So I switched that up and blogged a ton, and now things are going better than ever. So I know this is a really long intro, but seriously, guys, this episode is so packed with free value and just tips. And if you're new to SEO or just want to clarify some things and you're in the car or you're taking notes, this is the episode for you. So without any further ado, here's Dylan. Dylan, how's it going, man?
Hey, doing well. How are you?
Doing well. Have you, I thought of you the other day because my parents are trying to sell their motorcycles, and I was like, I wonder if Dylan's riding right now.
Nice.
Or if you're just cycling.
Yeah, I'm on the human-powered bicycles right now. My motorcycle's in the shop, but should be out in a few weeks, and that should coincide with hopefully a little bit drier and warmer weather, so I'm excited.
Totally. And you're in Portland, right?
I am.
Yeah. So is there a lot of good space to ride out there, or do you kind of go outside of the city?
Yeah, it's pretty great. The city is decent for riding. People kind of watch out for you better than most cities. And then anytime you're in downtown Portland, you're only like a mile or 2 away from beautiful foresty roads. So it's fun.
That's awesome. And is there a lot of place, I guess, for you to ride your human-powered cycle, if you will, your regular bike?
Yeah.
You do that like pretty long distance, yeah?
Totally. Portland's a great city for that as well. And I try to ride it as much as possible. And I'm always aiming for at least like 100 miles or so a week, maybe 100 or 2, which keeps it fun.
That's insane, dude. That's a lot of mileage on a bike every week. That's awesome, man. Well, dude, I wanted to kind of just have you on, and I know that you've been diving into some SEO education recently, producing some education, and I've loved everything I've seen and been following your work for a while now, even as you've gone through like company changes and stuff like that. And so wanted to just bring you on and kind of let you share a little bit about yourself and kind of SEO and stuff like that. But tell me a little bit more about yourself and how long you've been in the wedding industry.
Yeah, I've been a photographer for, I think this is going to be my 8th year. Started in 2010, I believe. And I think I was into SEO prior to being a photographer. Before that, I'd started a company building bicycle wheels, and I had to learn SEO to try to market that because I didn't have money to pay for ads. And then when I transitioned into photography, kind of the same story. I always thought that SEO was more of a DIY marketing effort, and it would be cheaper in the long run, and it's worked out well.
Dude, that's awesome. I had no idea about that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Have you, and right now, would you say like, what is do you mind sharing like your main keyword that you try to rank for, and, you know, like how you came up with that, if you will?
Totally. I mean, my main like money keyword is super simple. It's Portland wedding photographers, which is, I mean, pretty typical for a wedding photographer to just be their city. But I've worked hard at that for the last few years, and I'm usually between like number 6 and number 8, depending on the day. And it brings me a lot of work. Like I don't have to try hard with social media. I don't have to do any like paid advertising, and I just book out. So it's good.
That's awesome. I think a lot of people don't realize that is like, if SEO is really good, for a lot of people that's rare unless they've been in the business for a long time. It's like their SEO is really good, then like you said, you don't have to put all this effort into Instagram or different audiences or social media and stuff like that. You know, that's kind of a unique place to be, if you will.
Yeah.
Have you ever been number 1 for that keyword?
I haven't yet. It's a goal, but I've kind of reached a point where it's like the work and time it would take to chase number 1 would probably be like, I don't know if it's worth it for me. I'd have to be outranking some pretty major sites. It's not really wedding photographers ranking number 1. It's like Junebug or Yelp or Wedding Wires kind of stuff.
Right. It's like a conglomerate, list posts of like the best wedding photographers you should find. And
And then even more, I think that typically brides looking or grooms looking for wedding photographers, they look at more options than just like, oh, this is number 1, I'm going to click on that link only. They kind of open up like a few pages worth of photographers tabs, and just it's okay. Like as long as you're on the first few pages, you're typically pretty golden.
So do you think you can still be, I mean, it sounds like you're still being pretty booked out without being number 1. Do you think that's pretty possible for everybody to still have like a decent workload?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely dependent on the market size. But I've been in some smaller markets. I started out in Boise, Idaho, and as soon as I was on like page 2 or so, I was getting quite a few inquiries from Google. And then when I got to like around, I think I was number like 4 or 5 when I moved from Boise, I was getting just an insane amount of inquiries. So I didn't even have to be number 1. I think after I moved away from Boise, I started ranking number 1, and I was like, dang it.
That's awesome. You're like, this is really inconvenient.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the hard parts about SEO is it's such a long game. There's some like little tricks that you can do to speed things up, but it takes time.
Totally. I think that's something a lot of people don't realize. And having the fact that you switched markets, we'll have to talk about that, because I get that question all the time where people are like, how did you switch from one location to another? Or it's like a military mom or something like that. And I'm just like, there are a few things you can do, and Dylan's going to know what's up. What is it even, just for somebody who doesn't even know, what does even those numbers mean? You said like, I'm ranked number 1 or number 3. Like what are the most valuable numbers when it comes to Google ranking, if you will? And, you know, why do those fluctuate?
Totally. Well, so the ranking is just like where you would show up if you had, or where you show up for like the typical Google search. And that's without personalization. So you're not logged into your Google account, and depending on like your location settings, like if it's going to change from where they're Googling from. And then it's also going to change if they're on a mobile or desktop device. So there's lots of different tracking options to keep track of that. But the biggest thing to keep track of is just like, are you actually getting inquiries? And the rankings are a very useful benchmark, but they don't matter as much as the actual inquiries.
Totally. And now I think for you and I, we talk about like, if you can get in, if you're ranked, if you will, like on the front page, then that overall is going to be like a really good spot. And then like it slowly deteriorates after each page that you go.
Totally. So the numbers are pretty interesting. I don't have the actual like numbers for wedding photography industry because I think it's a bit different than like the typical Google results for different industries, but it's like 30% or so of the or people that are doing a Google search go to the first position's website. And then it's like 15% go to number 2 and like 5 or 10% go to number 3. And then it starts getting into the single digits and it drops off really quickly.
Wow. That's I think it's Malcolm Gladwell has a book called The Long Tail.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the importance of like the beginning, if you will.
For sure. And so, and I mean, another interesting fact that I saw a few days ago was the average age of the website that ranks number 3 is about a year old, and number 2 is around 2 years old, and average age for ranking number 1 is like 3.5 or 4 years old. So it just takes time.
That is so interesting. That's like a pretty crazy stat. Now, what would you knew this from kind of your cycling wheels situation. Like what's the very basic essence of SEO, if you will, like for somebody who's like, I have no idea what this is or what this means, like, and we've kind of chatted about kind of the a few parts of the answer, but like what are some basics of SEO that somebody wouldn't even know, or like why is it important to a business?
For sure. So like the basics of SEO, and this is like one of the hardest things for me to explain to people, but in essence, you're trying to sort of game the system, but just present your information in a way that is best for Google, and other search engines as well, but Google's the main one for most people. And that's formatting of your website, creating content that is interesting to viewers, and building your authority generally through acquiring backlinks to your site.
Totally. That's the biggest thing that I've learned is like, even without backlinks, like making a certain page the authority for that topic, so if you wanted to write a blog post on like 5 peanut butter and jelly recipes, well, it's like, is your website about food? Is your website about this? Like, there's all kinds of like authority and structure that makes Google say, oh, I'm pretty sure this person is the authority on this, or this is a pretty good rank. And like Google wants to show the best information to the person searching.
Exactly.
So that's like a kind of complicated situation.
For sure. It's super interesting because so much of it's becoming like machine learning on Google's side. And so you're trying to like backwards analyze their algorithms, and it's changing on their end so quickly that it makes the SEO sphere just change rapidly as well. So it's super fun.
I heard about that recently, the past few years of like Google is getting smarter, obviously. And so, back in the day, you'd go to these websites, maybe even like really old websites like GeoCities or MySpace, and you just see these HTML tags, just sitting at the bottom of a website,
totally.
Just like all these crazy tags to try and be picked up for everything. And nowadays that's like very looked down upon and Google actually like will blacklist you, or de-rank you. But now it's like Google is almost human in the sense of how it reads. Like you're spacing between your paragraphs, and like just how well does your content, read, if you will. It's kind of insane to be thinking about, because it's like there's all these variables that we have in business, and your main goal is a photographer, but it's like, hey, if you can learn a little bit about this or social media, like a lot of people choose the social media route, it's like, hey, you can put a leg up in your business. But yeah, it's kind of interesting how Google is like, hey, we're just gonna get better at learning this, and we want it to be like a pretty solid information that we're sharing with people.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly interesting where they're going with that. And it's been fun optimizing for that in the last few years, because when I started, it was definitely like what you talked about, just like spammy keyword stuffing and hidden content. And I remember like looking at what my competitors were doing, and they just had really bad stuff, like link wheel, like groups of people, and gosh, I would just like pull apart like what they'd done for SEO, and it was all just spam. Yeah,
Right. It's like anything to get a leg up, if you will.
totally. Like I think the number one person for Boise when I was trying to target that keyword, they had thousands of Chinese forum like links to their site, and like everything was in Chinese, and it was still working for them somehow.
What in the world?
But like that does not fly these days at all.
That's crazy. So, at least for, it's safe to assume for somebody who is at least like trying to have a basic premise of this, it's like Google is still the main authority on this. Like if you wanted to spend attention on Bing or DuckDuckGo or something like that, it might help, but Google's still going to be the thing that we have to pay attention to, right?
For sure. And typically it's if you're optimized for Google, you're going to do pretty dang well with Yahoo, Bing, DuckDuckGo. But like for me personally, I think it's over like 95 to 98% of my traffic is from Google in comparison to the other search engines. I think I saw 3 hits from DuckDuckGo yesterday, and I was pretty surprised by that. Like that was a big day for DuckDuckGo.
For anybody who doesn't know, DuckDuckGo is a search engine similar to Google, but it doesn't track you and what you search for, as far as I know.
Yeah, I mean, I believe in DuckDuckGo. I hope they do well, but they're not there yet.
Yeah, totally. It's one of those things where my wife is like, "Why doesn't your phone use Google?" And I'm like, "Well, I just don't want to use it." But no, that makes perfect sense. So somebody is getting started, or maybe they're just launching a website, right? And they are. Let's pick like a crazy topic, like puppies or something. Sure. Maybe they're trying to sell puppies, and they want to start that website about puppies for sale, etc. Like, what would be their first 5 posts, or what would be their first page that you would say, here's some insights on like what I think they should do?
Totally. So, I mean, the biggest thing they need to start out with is their homepage. And in like the photography sphere, one thing I always see is people have a homepage with about 1 sentence max of text. And if you're trying to rank for anything these days, you need at least a good paragraph. So if you're trying to sell puppies, you need a sentence about the puppies, a sentence about like you selling the puppies and what city you're in or what area you're servicing, why people should come to you. And the more you can expand on those, the better. And then you need to start building supporting content for those. So just either blog posts or category pages that really dive in deeper to those topics that will help you build that authority.
Totally. It's like for people who, my analogy is like the main keyword that you want and your homepage should be like either the top of the flow chart and or the top of the mountain, if you will. And it's like, as you dive into the site, you get more connected into like supporting evidence, if you will.
Exactly. That's totally true. I was trying to like draw that up last night, and I came up with this little pyramid shape, but it's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the front door, or at least where we want people to go in through the front, even though, oftentimes over a few years you get found for different things. And something I found out, at least a few years ago, was I wasn't necessarily even planning on trying to rank. And because word of mouth, those other variables we talked about before were working pretty well. Word of mouth was pretty strong for me. And where I was getting all my leads, I was able to not have to have my Google presence be as strong, but I knew that I wanted that to be strong. Like I wanted to work on that. And you don't want to shoot, 35 weddings a year and blog all of those and put all the effort into them and have them not rank, because that's like not that fun.
No.
And you're like, why am I writing all this stuff? And so for me, one thing I found out was like, after chatting with a few friends and kind of researching a little bit, I found out that there was a lot of content that I wrote and blog posts that I was ranking for by accident, because I wasn't really planning, and my homepage wasn't necessarily ranking really high, but I'd have this blog post, and even to this day, I have this random blog post from this couple like 5 years ago that ranks like number 2 and number 3 for a certain keyword. And granted, it's not like it never brings me any leads at all, but it's just so random, and it's like, and even for me, it was easy to like, oh, why am I looking at this? And you and I would say that keyword is maybe it's not a very competitive keyword, if you will. And maybe my particular subject is not actually getting what people want. But man, I'm still thinking about the puppies. So
Yeah.
Google, we were talking about Google and just kind of everything that they do. And I know a lot of people, when they try to dive in, there's Google Analytics and there's Google Search Console. And there used to be Webmaster Tools, which I think is Search Console now. And we're getting really nerdy here. But what is the difference between Google Analytics and Google Search Console? And, can anybody use those tools? Like, how do they start?
Totally. So yeah, both of those are free tools by Google. And Analytics is mostly used for tracking your traffic, where it's coming from, what pages they're visiting, how long they're spending on your site, etc. And it's incredibly useful. And it's one of the first things I suggest anybody signing up for when they create a website. And then Search Console or Webmaster Tools is more for the search side. And I also suggest signing up as soon as you start a website. And that's where you're able to submit your sitemap, which is key for Google, and then see backlinks that Google sees to your website and what search traffic you're getting. And I think it's one of the most fundamental tools that you can use for SEO, and it's completely free. So I definitely suggest jumping in, signing up, and just playing around with it, because it's pretty daunting at first, but it all makes sense after a while.
Right. Absolutely. It's definitely can be overwhelming because it's a new tool and it's a new piece of software essentially, and both of them, but yeah, they are free, and there's a lot of tutorials online, and even Google will help you hey, find your analytics code and put it into your site. But before we even go into the sitemap conversation, I'm going to have a beeline to talk about content management systems, like WordPress and Squarespace. In my experience, so I personally use WordPress. I know you use WordPress as well. I think, right? Yeah. I was I'm pretty sure, because we have very similar themes and anything. A lot of photographers or just business people I know didn't put that much time into their site at the beginning, because they're, it's not that easy to design a site if you're not, kind of nerdy or into web design. Mm-hmm. And so they go with Squarespace, and a lot of Squarespace sites are so beautiful and I love them. But in my experience, even my assistant, she has a Squarespace site. It has tons of content on it. And I've even tried to Google her main keyword, and she doesn't show up at all, not even on the first 3 pages, first 4 pages. And I've used some of the tools that I have to try and just see. And I think there's some settings in Squarespace that are not as easily accessible for SEO. But what has been your experience just in WordPress? I feel like if you could start a WordPress.com today, even the non-self-hosted one, and within a few days, you could try to rank for something. At least Google's going to find it if you put your name in or something like that. Have you found any? I feel like WordPress is a lot easier for people to rank in SEO. Is that true, or do you think it's just people who don't know Squarespace as well? I think
that WordPress is easier to rank, but like you were saying, Squarespace is infinitely easier to make a beautiful site. So it's hard for me because I personally will only use WordPress, but I don't fault people for choosing Squarespace. And it's just a major challenge when I have to dive in and help them with their Squarespace sites. Because on many themes, something as easy as a meta description or a title tag is impossible to change. Where on WordPress, that's one of the easiest things to do. So I feel like Squarespace is a really poor blogging platform, but it's a great website builder. So.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. It's the sites always look really great, but then it's trying to do something simple, add a meta description or a meta tag, or I know a lot of people are trying to do alt tags for their photos because they're I heard I should do this, and it still doesn't show, and I'm just
it's pretty poor for that. And like you're saying with WordPress, I've definitely been able to rank brand new websites with no backlinks in a few weeks for terms that have decent amount of volume and decently hard, nothing crazy, but people are actually searching for those terms. So I find WordPress is very simple to do that process.
Right. Absolutely. I think a lot of people don't understand why like backlinks are important, and that's something I never really paid attention to. Like I never submitted my weddings or anything like that. And this is for any entrepreneur. Like you could write a guest post about something, giving advice, but for me, I never put any value in that. And then I was like, I have all these weddings that I'm proud of, and I should try and share them. And I slowly started submitting them. And one of the benefits is, one, you get the press coverage, but then two, you also get a backlink, and different sites are going to give, it's almost like, for somebody who doesn't know, a backlink is like somebody is speaking for you. They're vouching for you and saying, hey, this site is pretty cool. And that's like a very non-technical version, but it helps give your site more of that authority that we talked about, and just kind of like, oh, their site is actually a good piece for this. Has that been your experience? I know you've been featured a bunch, and so do you think that's helped you a lot, or do you think you would still be able to rank without that help?
It definitely helps. I would never turn away backlink opportunities. In fact, it's one of the things that it's going to be an uphill battle for you if you're trying to rank a site and you have literally no backlinks to your site. And so when I relaunched my new website, I think it was about 18 months ago or so, that was the hardest challenge for me, because I went from having a site that had like hundreds of domains pointing at it to one that had like 3, and most of them were my own social media profiles. So building up those links was one of the things that definitely built that authority and helped my rankings. And you really have to do that. There's no way around it, really.
Yeah, I think it's like, especially nowadays, at least in competitive markets, like DC or Portland, any big city, it's just going to be crucial. But the good news is that people are always looking for, even non-wedding submitted sites, like people are always looking for extra content. Like if you approach somebody and say, hey, I want to write a guest post for you, it's about this topic, and I'm pretty sure it would be great. And they might say, yeah. And hey, you write that topic, make sure it's valuable for them, and ask for a backlink, if possible. And, that's what I found has always been kind of fun. Like you can, especially in the wedding industry, like why not have a florist write for you, or vice versa? Like how to photograph florals correctly. And there's a lot that you can do to kind of exchange this. And I think one thing that you and I love is all of this is free, this effort, at least, this particular part.
Totally. Yeah. And you can make that process pretty easy on yourself. I've also found like creating like one article that has multiple like vendors mentioned, and then just creating like an email template to email those vendors and say like, hey, like I wrote this post, you're mentioned, like feel free to share it on your social medias or blog it or something. That can cut down the time in outreach, and you get like multiple backlinks for one post. It's amazing.
Right. Because hopefully a lot of vendors, like DJs and florists, a lot of them don't blog. And I think, one, they need to listen to this episode. And then two, it's like, guys, you should blog something. Like just have a piece of content. Like, how was this wedding for you as a DJ or a florist or whatever? But then at the same time, as photographers, if we email them photos and, like you said, kind of a little bit of a vendor shout out, if you will, hey, like you can copy these and use these, and it's going to benefit everybody. Like a rising tide lifts all boats a little bit, at least in the SEO world.
For sure. Oh, it really does. And I agree. It's kind of crazy that I look at other vendor websites all the time, and photography is this like incredibly brutal SEO, like battlefield almost. And then you look at DJ websites, and like they might have a website. They probably just have like a Facebook page or a Yelp or something that they share, and they don't blog, they don't care, and somehow they still get booked up.
Yeah.
But I feel like you could crush that, like that whole scene, if you just had like a good blog, and go a step further than blogging the weddings that you go to. Actually blog like, here are tips from a wedding DJ on planning a wedding or planning a reception or keeping the party going. Stuff like that that's actually usable for your visitors, and Google will think is interesting. So
I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to start a DJ site right now, and we'll see in a week if I can rank on the first page of Google for like a big keyword.
Yeah. I think it can be done.
People don't know that, like, yeah, it's I don't know, especially any non-wedding photographer vendors, like this is good. There's a good chance that it's not as competitive, as the photography industry in your big city for the most part. Yeah, that's now I'm just thinking about like, what would I put on a DJ site? How would I make it unique? I need some photos of me being a fake DJ. I feel so bad. I would just refer like a good buddy of mine.
Yeah.
Have you found, so like we both talk about kind of our main keyword, if you will, and for a lot of us, for wedding photographers, it's like, hey, city name, wedding photographer. And the reason we choose that is because that's what somebody's going to Google. That's what somebody's looking for. They're not looking for, unfortunately, as much as we would like, they're not looking for Dylan or Adam or Sarah or whoever. And a lot of people don't realize that. They're like, it's good to show up for your name, and you definitely should show up for your company name or your person's name. What are maybe some other keywords that people don't even think about when it comes to wedding photography that it's like, hey, maybe you should have a page on this or a post on this?
Yeah.
That can kind of help give the authority to that number one keyword.
Yeah. So that's one thing that I've been doing the last year, is kind of slowly working on those supporting posts. And one that I did maybe 6 months ago was just wedding venues in Portland, Oregon. And I saw that there was 10 times as much traffic to that than Portland wedding photographers. And the difficulty to rank for that was lower. So I made a post of the venues I'd shot at or hadn't shot at, put it through in a few of my photos, linked to most of their websites or blog posts for the weddings I'd done at those venues, and wrote a little bit about like the different outdoor venues or indoor venues or city venues, and just like made this post that it targets like 20 different keywords in the content, and it's bringing in more traffic than any other post to my website. So
totally, there's a few venue posts on my site, and they always rank like higher than my other stuff and get more traffic, and I'm just like, why don't you like my photos though? But it is useful, and it's these posts help kind of like we said, give authority, and kind of they vouch for our main keyword, if you will.
For sure.
What is, now that we've talked about kind of WordPress and Squarespace, and now we're finally coming back, like, what is a sitemap? What's the best way that you would explain a sitemap to somebody who doesn't know? And what does that look like for somebody who's starting a new website or kind of trying to redo the one that they have?
Yeah. So the sitemap, generally you're talking about like an XML sitemap, which is just a piece of code that tells the search engines what pages exist on your website and when they were updated, and how often they should go and look at your website to crawl it for new changes. So it's really important that you submit that, because when you have a brand new website, Google is only going to crawl your site if somebody else links to it and they have a reason to see that you exist. But if you ping them and tell them that you exist and you have like 15 pages and you're blogging fairly regularly, so they should check back, then you're going to get a lot more crawler traffic on your site, which will lead to rankings.
Totally. And there's a few tools. What tools have you used to kind of like, you don't have to, for people who don't know, like, you don't have to write any code to make a sitemap. I think Squarespace will do it, but I know WordPress, there's a few plugins that will make the sitemap for you, right?
Totally. I generally just use Yoast, SEO plugin for WordPress. They have a great sitemap tool. And then Squarespace does have a sitemap as well. It's super simple to submit. Outside of that, I don't really use any other plugins unless I really have to. And off the top of my head, I can't even think of their names. But yeah, I've been like on Team Yoast for a long time, and I don't even look at the others really.
Totally. It's super helpful, just because even if it's not 100% accurate, it's super helpful when you're getting used to SEO and you're like, oh, if I should probably write a little bit more, or how many times does what I want to rank for, is it mentioned in this particular post and stuff like that? So it makes sense.
Yeah, it spurs thought that you probably wouldn't have without knowledge of SEO. And like you said, right now it's like a lot of the things they're recommending might not technically be correct, but you're going to be in a better spot than if you hadn't thought of any of that on your own.
Right. Exactly. And it's, again, we go back to, it's free and easy stuff. So if you're listening and you have a website with 5 blog posts on it. Well, what are those blog post names? What do you want those blog posts to rank, if at all? And it can just be whatever keyword you're trying to go for. And oftentimes, even without paying money on SEO tools, like you can just go into Google in a incognito window, using Safari or Chrome, and try and search for that post or search for a keyword. And then at the bottom, there's like people searched for this other stuff. And it's good insight that I feel like if we spent more time on, people would be able to be like, oh, I could try this. And then, hey, make sure that your photos, their titles are also similar to that post that they're on, because Google wants to see that, oh, this is all one thing and this is all one kind of authoritative subject, if you will. But yeah, it's
so true.
A lot of people don't get that. One question that I always think about, and we've talked about this a little bit before, is does every page on your site need to rank number one? Or, even like, do you have to put all that effort into things like your about page, reviews maybe, or pricing, or testimonials, if you will, or even the contact page, right? Because the contact is where they're going to send you the lead. Mm-hmm. Like, do those pages have to rank? What's your kind of personal strategy for those?
Totally. So for me, I go after pages that I want to rank for certain things. Like my homepage, I want my main keyword, the next level down of difficulty, and like next highest in volume, I want to be my category pages. And then finally, like the lower volume, lower difficulty are my individual blog posts. And those are all I really care about ranking. I don't care if my About Me page ranks. I don't really care if my contact page on its own ranks, because I don't think that it has enough interesting content. Like, I don't think it should rank. Like, I'd be mad at Google if they're like, hey, your contact form is ranking number 1 for like Portland wedding photographer. I want people to end up there, but I want them to first see some content that's interesting to them and is worthwhile. So I only try to rank pages that have actual value.
Totally. What about a portfolio page? I mean, that has value, but at least for wedding photographers, it's mostly going to be images.
Totally. I've tried to rank portfolio pages before, and it's going to be difficult. If you don't have like some text underneath the photos, you're going to have a really hard time unless you just build a ton of links to that site or to that page. And I've had much better success creating pages that have just more content and less photo heavy. And so I don't even have portfolio pages on my site right now. And it's ranking better. My traffic's higher than it was when I did.
That's incredible, dude.
Yeah.
There's a lot to SEO that it doesn't necessarily have to feel like unconventional, but that's one of those things. Like when somebody goes to make their site, they're like, oh, I'm a photographer, I should show my work. And the reality is maybe on your homepage, you still have a slider or whatever and show some of your best work. And then you have posts that they're friends of the homepage and they're like, hey, we can support this homepage. Like we know we can vouch for it, but your portfolio is almost, nowadays it can even be redundant, and I think that's one of the reasons it doesn't rank either.
Yeah, I think it's kind of dead weight.
Right, exactly. And at least until Google can read photos, which it's getting really good at, but until they incorporate that into SEO, it's not a big deal right now.
For sure.
So last question for you. I feel like I see this a ton in Facebook groups and all kinds of stuff where people just feel lost, and maybe they're in a situation similar to us where, hey, they're full-time, they love this, where it's going really well, but it's one of those time versus money things, and they say, hey, I've never cared about SEO before, but I would like to care. Can I just hire an SEO consultant or somebody to do this? Do you know anybody that's done that before? Have you ever done that? Like, I feel like everything we talked about, I mean, at least for us, this is 40 minutes of some free suggestions, some DIY suggestions that'll really help. And at least for me, they're the only things I've used, everything we talked about. But have you ever found that hiring a firm or a consultant to really like help boost things?
Yeah, I think it can definitely be beneficial if you're extremely careful about who you hire. It's the SEO world is kind of, there's a few good people at the top, and then there's varying levels of sketchiness below that. And if you hire somebody that does like just practices that aren't going to be long-term beneficial to you, they can kind of nuke your site and it can be pretty bad. So it's just something that you almost have to know a lot about SEO in order to hire the right person, which is scary.
Right. That's super terrifying. I know, at least for me, I always try and look up to people that seem to be doing well. And I mean, the simple fact is just Google your keyword that you want to show up for and who's on the front page. And, at the very least, these people won't answer. But I always say, like, hey, message them, ask them how they did it, or if they have any resources, or if they would offer a mentoring session to look at your site or something like that. Like,
Totally.
I'm all about, like, hustling and hey, it's better to try and fail and not try at all. If somebody doesn't want to answer you, or they say, hey, my mentoring sessions are $1,000 or $5,000.
Yeah. And maybe, and sometimes I've done the same, and just reach out to somebody in a different market, because your direct competitor might be a little guarded with what they tell you. But
totally.
Like if I reach out to somebody that's ranking like really high in Seattle, like Ryan Flynn is ranking like number 3 in Seattle. Talk to him and see what he's doing, because he's ranking a Squarespace site in a really competitive market. Talk to somebody like you in DC. You're on the other side of the country, so you have no reason to not give me a few tips or help me out.
Totally. I'm not trying to rank in Portland anytime soon.
Nice.
I have friends there that I would like to hang out with, but yeah. And I feel like when I look at your photos, you and Bench Heish and a few other folks, I just look at your guys' work and I'm like, that looks like the Pacific Northwest. Like, that's exactly what I want it to be. And I'm just like, yeah, I would not be the same person if I lived over there. That's awesome, dude. So thanks so much for kind of sharing like kind of all of this stuff. And I'll link, you actually have a Patreon that I'm a member of, and I'm a huge Patreon supporter in general. Like, I've loved it so far, and it's been really inexpensive for me to join. And I've loved kind of the Facebook group interaction and just overall just SEO sharing. And you give a really good rundown of the basic terms of Google Analytics and all of that stuff, even in the first post. And it's seriously worth its weight in gold. And it's like another of those business decisions where it's like, why wouldn't we pay a little bit so that we can get more leads? I want to ask you just a few quick fun questions. Sure. We'll link the Patreon in the show notes, but I want to ask you a few fun questions. One, what content are you consuming right now, whether it's a book or a Netflix show or music that you're really into right now? Two, what are your goals for 2018, SEO related or not? And then last question is your favorite part of last year of 2017.
Awesome. So content that I'm consuming. I just watched an entire Netflix series last night. Gosh.
That's why you didn't get that post done, dude. I'm just kidding.
And gosh, what was it called? The End of the World. It was pretty unbelievable.
Really? Was it good?
Yeah, it was great. It's like little British hipster 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds going on a little adventure and getting into some trouble.
That's awesome.
It was great. And then I watched Ingrid Goes West last night as well, which was kind of a movie about Instagram kind of taking over culture and
interesting,
kind of playful with Audrey Plaza. And what else? Music wise, I've been listening to like some kind of like emo shoegaze kind of, I don't know. I'm kind of like regressing to like 21-year-old Dylan or 19-year-old Dylan. Really digging it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I got a client questionnaire today. I send them like a little questionnaire that's like, hey, I just want to know like, what are your favorite bands? What's your favorite food? Just real basic stuff.
Yeah.
And one of them, they both said, we really love Rilo Kiley and the Decemberists. And those are bands that I went and saw live like 10th grade in high school.
Yeah.
And I immediately, all these feelings started flooding back, and I was like, who is this person? Like, what is going on? And I was like, this couple's perfect. We have to book.
Totally.
What's a goal for 2018?
Yeah. Goal for 2018. I'm doing SEO a bit more, and I've been doing some consulting. I've been doing some work for some e-commerce sites. I'm just like really enjoying that. And then I'm still shooting weddings full time. I'm trying to go. I've been doing like at least 40 weddings a year for the last 5 or 6 years, and I'm trying to get it down to like 30, maybe even like 25 would be great. I'm trying to get like a few more summer weekends available to hang out with friends and do fun stuff, stuff that I haven't done for 5 years.
Totally. And ride the motorcycle or the human powered cycle.
Exactly. Yeah. So like just trying to like claw back a little bit of that personal life. And then outside of that, I'm trying to ride my bike 5,000 miles, I guess, for 2018.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a big goal. And then favorite of 2017. Great question. Gosh, that's hard. It's brutally hard. I moved into a new house. That was probably one of the highlights.
That's awesome.
Yeah, adjusting to a different pace of life. I'd been living in like this downtown loft, and I was like super used to just like walking out my doorstep into like bars and coffee shops and restaurants and like street life. But now I'm like settling into a neighborhood, and I have a garage and a yard, and it's super awesome.
That's super cool. That's like, living in a city is really awesome, but there are times when I'm just like, where do I put my tools? Or like, where do you put your motorcycle? And
yeah, it's crazy how frustrating like the simplest things can be when you live in a condo or a loft. Or like how many parking tickets I got last year.
Exactly. Awesome, man. Dude, thanks so much. I know there are a few apps that I use. Are there any apps or resources that you use for SEO, just kind of general research?
Yeah, I use SEO Edge is like the rank tracking app that I use every day.
Yeah,
just
that's the best app in the world.
Totally. I just check my rankings real quick when I wake up or whenever I'm bored. And then outside of that, I don't really use any other iPhone apps. That's pretty much.
Yeah, I feel like everything else is kind of more intense, or you have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Like Ahrefs isn't something that I would suggest a photographer buying.
Totally.
Yeah. %.
Yeah, I use that every day, and I love it as far as like for my own personal uses, but it's expensive.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if the typical person could justify that expense.
Yeah, absolutely. Dude, well, thanks so much for coming on. We'll have to have you on again sometime, and maybe we'll talk about something less nerdy than SEO.
Right.
But I know both you and I, it's something we care about, and it's kind of fun. It's like something else to level up in your business, like not just becoming a better photographer, but hey, if I can get my site to be better, you can charge more, you can, do different things with your site and with your business, and why not? So I appreciate you coming on, man.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me. That was great.
Absolutely, man. Thanks. Cool. So that was like our fake goodbye, but dude, thanks so much for really being on.
Yeah, that was amazing. That was fun.
Awesome. I tried to, I had a few different questions, and I pulled a few other Facebook groups for photographers, and I was just like, hey, I'm going to talk to a photographer who ranks on the first page for his keyword. Like, I didn't even have to sell it. Like, hey, check out this SEO expert.
Nice.
And I was like, what questions do you have? And I kind of researched like past questions, and I saw so many people looking for consultants and firms, and I think it's totally fine, and it's different. Like if they were going to hire you, but I'm just like, put some work in, like put some time, or let's just think about like draw a map of your website, like on an iPad or on a piece of paper. And does that make sense to you? And it's one of those things that I don't know why I understood it early, but I don't know.
I think that's been the hardest thing for me. Like it just came pretty natural to me as well. And so I'm just like, how do you not understand this? But
right. It's like, maybe we should come up with another analogy of like, if you wanted to know more about plumbing, well, then you Google about plumbing, and it's like, hopefully that person is an expert and is showing why they're an expert, and it's, I don't know. There's I appreciate it though, dude. And I'm loving the Patreon and the SEO group. It's kind of fun. I feel like I'm not where you are. I mean, now I'm finally on the first page, which I'm feeling really pumped about.
That's pretty rad.
Yeah. I'm about to redo my site. Like I've got a flow themes going, and I'm about to switch it up. So I'm like in the flow launch phase, and similar to kind of the questions I've been asking, I'm like, do I have to care about my portfolio that much? And I kind of want one just for fun.
Yeah.
But I'm like, it doesn't have to rank, Adam. Like we don't have to put a text block in here. We don't have to do as much work as we did for the homepage or, our other pages. So
exactly. It feels so good when you like realize that, and it's just like only put effort into the pages that you're wanting to rank.
Yeah. So one thing I did, and maybe this isn't good, but I think it's helped, is we researched somebody who ranked for the keyword, but his photography is awful. I think he hired a firm.
Yeah.
But the sitemap is solid, and I even was able to find his sitemap online, so I just looked at it, and for every wedding that he shoots, he also blogs like an information sheet about the venue by itself.
Interesting.
And so I've been doing that mostly just with the venues I like and want to rank for. And I'm usually ranking between 1 and 5 right next to the venue site. That's which is really cool. And I kind of sell it as like, this is my one tip this will be my guest post someday on your Patreon if you ever want, is I put a lot of time into it, but I just write still personal perspective. Like I loved shooting at this venue. But I do a little research and like, hey, what ceremony options can you have here? And then I show my photos from the ceremony and then reception and kind of like a tool for a bride who's like looking at the quick facts, if you will. Like they don't want to explore the whole site for a venue.
Exactly. No, that's golden. I've thought about doing that, and I've like told myself to do that. And, like, research.
It's a ton of work.
I know, and like get the pricing for the venue and just say like, hey, the pricing starts at like $3,000 a day or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
And I definitely want to do that at least for the venues that are like super rad that I really want to shoot at quite a bit.
Yeah, totally. Even just like 10 of them. And then what I do is say in your blog post, so it's like, Kara and Aaron got married at this venue. I like link their venue name to my venue post instead of the website.
That's gold.
Yeah. And even I've seen some of the venues have seen that page, and I was kind of nervous. I was like, I don't know if they'll like this or whatever, but I'm like, they'll still rank number 1. I'll just be number 2 or 3. And some of them saw it and they're like, I love this page. This is so cool. Cause it's kind of like, I still make them like a personal testimonial about the venue.
Yeah.
So it's not they don't feel that way. I'm not trying to undercut them per se. Like,
sure.
It's just a quick sheet of facts that like somebody on their phone can be like, oh, they start at $6,000, or there's this, and oh, that's what their ceremony room looks like if it's indoors. Cool. It's been really useful. But we need to I'm going to try and do a bigger page like you with just kind of like the venues in DC. But there's not a lot of venues in DC that are awesome. And so I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what we want to do. My assistant and I are like, how can we need a page like this?
Yeah, totally.
But awesome, dude. Well, hey, thanks so much, man. I'll hopefully see you in Patreon and see the latest posts when you post them. Do you know when the next post is coming out?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much ready. Have you done text posts on Patreon at all?
Only once or twice.
It's the worst. But yeah.
Just like formatting and everything.
Exactly. So I have it like written in a Google Sheet, and I just need to like format it into Patreon.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, your first post on there was really good, but I saw it and I was like, this took a long time. Like even just once he put it in Patreon, he's like, oh, I need this photo to show up. And it's stupid stuff because we're like, in WordPress, this would be a few seconds.
Exactly.
And so come on, Patreon. Anyway.
Yeah, get your stuff together. But
yeah, awesome, dude. Thanks so much for coming on. And yeah, I can't wait to read the new post coming out. And hopefully I'll keep you updated if I keep to rank.
Yeah, totally.
Keep ranking.
And send me the link to this podcast when it comes out, and I'll share it as well.
Absolutely, dude. I'll definitely send that out. It should be out. This one we're going to try and come out tomorrow.
Oh, cool.
Hopefully. We'll see. I have some plans, and if it doesn't come out tomorrow, it'll come out in 2 weeks. So
nice. That's
awesome. Thanks, Dylan. Have a wonderful day, man.
Take care. You too.
Dude, such a cool episode with Dylan, man. He's just got so much knowledge to share, and he's been in the business for a while now, and so he has his values in line with where he wants to be. Something I love about Dylan is that, like he said, he doesn't care about portfolio pages or anything like that. Like he only wants to rank for a few different pages on his site because it's strategic, and that's where his particular leads are going to come from. And it's just so good to be on him. So definitely check out his Patreon. He has an SEO resource in there. It's super affordable to join. I'm a member, and it's just super helpful. So definitely check him out and check out his work. He's an incredible photographer and businessman. And if you're into cycling or motorcycles, that would be awesome too. And yeah, if you could leave an iTunes review for us on the Bearded Tog, that would be amazing. So please, if you have some time today, leave us a review, 5 stars, and let me know if you left that review. You can shoot me a text or an email, thebeardedtog@gmail.com. And thank you so much for listening, guys. We have a lot more action-packed episodes coming soon to you guys, and it's going to be awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Have a wonderful week, and thanks for putting up with my sick voice if you got to the end of this episode. Thanks, guys.